Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, members of the jury. Before I start, I want to thank you for your time and attention this week. I know it's been a long week, and there's been quite a bit of evidence and a lot of witnesses, so thank you for that. This is Tim Smith. Tim was happy. He was successful. He was kind. He was involved in the community. And he was loved by everyone. Tim was everything that the defendant was not. And the defendant couldn't stand it. And when Tim decided he was finally going to leave the defendant and move to DeLand and get a new job, the defendant was so angry. He told everybody, if Tim thinks he's leaving me and moving, he's got another thing coming. He thought Tim owed him. He was not going to let Tim leave him that way. So instead, he brutally murdered him. This is a case about death by 1,000 cuts. And what that means is that there isn't one big piece of evidence or one big witness, but the accumulation of many seemingly small pieces of evidence, when put together, become devastating, and they result in the overwhelming proof of guilt. That's what this case is about. The defendant thought he was smarter than everyone. When Darrell Levine asked him, "Did you do this?" he didn't say no. He said, "No one is ever going to be able to prove it." But guess what? He hadn't met Sergeant Pinder and the other detectives from the Marion County Sheriff's Office, because they worked tirelessly for 8 months to prove this case. And remember all the things they told you they did. The detectives canvassed both neighborhoods where the apartment was and the residence was numerous times. They dug through the trash at those places. They knocked on every door and tried to collect every piece of video that they could. Other detectives went to every single business on the street between the apartment and the residence. They dug through the dumpsters there looking for evidence. And they got every single piece of video footage that they could. And then for the next several months, Sergeant Pinder reviewed all of that video footage. And think about how much video footage that was. I mean, they were asking for a span of 12 to 24 hours. He reviewed every piece of that until he found the defendant's truck and Tim's Jeep on that. So in the end, the defendant was wrong. We can prove it to you, and I'm going to show you that this morning. The defendant's charged, as you know, with one count of first-degree murder. And the judge read this to you, and this is in your jury instructions. This is what we have to prove to you before you can find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. Now, you also heard in the jury instructions, there's what's called lesser included offenses. So even though this is what's charged, you will have two other options: second-degree murder and manslaughter. But the judge will tell you, you have to find the defendant guilty of the highest charge we have proven to you, which I submit to you is first-degree premeditated murder. The elements of second-degree murder and manslaughter are in your jury instructions. Second-degree murder would be if there was no premeditation, and the defendant and Tim just had a big fight, and the defendant killed him. Manslaughter is if the defendant didn't intend to kill Tim, but he did an act which killed Tim. Neither one of those apply to the facts in this case. And when you look at the elements of first-degree murder, you won't need to go any further to even look at the second-degree murder or the manslaughter. Now, as you see, there's three things, and that's it. These are the three things that we have to prove to you for you to find the defendant guilty. Number one, Timothy Smith is dead. There's no question there. That was stipulated to. That is Timothy Smith, and he is dead. The defense is stipulated to that. Number 1 is crossed off. That's proven beyond a reasonable doubt. And I want to skip to 3, the premeditated killing of Tim. Was it premeditated? And I think a lot of people have the wrong conception of what premeditated means. This is the definition of killing with premeditation. It's killing after consciously deciding to do so. The decision must be present in the mind at the time of the killing. The law does not fix the exact period of time that must pass between the formation of the premeditated intent to kill and the killing. The period of time must be long enough to allow reflection by the defendant. The premeditated intent to kill must be formed before the killing. And what this means is there is no amount of time that has to be present. It doesn't have to be an hour before he decided he was going to kill Tim, the day before, or the week before. The only thing that has to happen for it to be premeditated is he decided he was going to kill him, and he had time to reflect on it and do it. That's what this says. There is no fixed exact period of time. That is what the law in Florida is, for you to find him guilty of premeditated murder. And I know we see a lot of shows on TV, and they make lists, they plan it for a while. And even though he did do that here, there is no set amount of time for premeditation. And how do we know it was premeditated? We have 2 different ways we know. One is the diphenhydramine. Tim did not take the diphenhydramine. The only way he got the diphenhydramine was from this guy right here. He had 30 times the amount of a normal dose of diphenhydramine in his system. We know he had a big interview the next day. There's no way he took that on his own. And he's the only person that could have given it to him. And the only reason that he would do that is so it would be easier for him to kill Tim, and Tim couldn't fight back. And that's why he did that. That's the only reason he would give him the diphenhydramine. And that clearly proves premeditation. But even if you don't think that he gave him the diphenhydramine, or you have questions about that, the manner in which he killed Tim proves premeditation. And that's because of a strangulation. That's a prolonged, tightening, squeezing, remember, until he broke his neck. When you are doing that, it takes some time. And Dr. Corey said that mark was so defined and dark that it had been on there a while. During that time when you are doing that and you are squeezing, you intend to kill Tim Smith. There's no way you don't intend to kill Tim Smith during the time it takes to strangle him. That is premeditation. Fits the exact definition of premeditation. And also, it's not just strangulation. We have 2 separate acts. He not only strangled him in the most horrific manner, he beat him in the face. I mean, multiple blows, multiple. You have the left eye, you have the right eye. I mean, during that time frame of beating him in the face, the time it takes to go get the ligature, whatever it was, maybe he had it next to him. He had to consciously pick that up, put it around Tim's neck, and then start squeezing it. There is no way you can say that he did not intend to kill Tim Smith and it wasn't premeditated. For both of those reasons. This is clearly a case of premeditated murder. He didn't just all of a sudden snap and say, oh, I'm going to kill Tim. And that's 3. So now we've met 1, Tim is dead, we've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. Is it premeditated? Sure. You have 2 different ways it's premeditated. Pick which one. They both apply in this case. What does that leave? The death was caused by the criminal act of Herbert Swilley. That's the last thing we have to prove to you, is that this guy did it. I first want to talk about the defense witnesses before we go into our evidence. We heard from Amy Counts. She said she heard a child or a person screaming Friday night in the general direction of the apartment of Tim and the defendant's apartment, which is 3.5 blocks away. Thanks for the testimony, Ms. Counts, but Tim was already dead at that point. We know Tim was dead Friday evening around 11 o'clock. Remember that there had been no use of his phone after 9:45 on Thursday. He didn't go to work, nobody had seen him, he didn't reply to a text, he didn't reply to a call. And by the time they found him Saturday, he had already started to decompose. So Amy may have heard some screaming or a child screaming Friday night, but it didn't have a thing to do with this case. Not a thing. And it added nothing. Matt Beeler, I'm not really sure what he was called for. He said he flirted with Tim on Grindr the week he was killed, and then he found out Tim died. Okay. So that's fine, that's all true. That doesn't affect anything, the facts of this case, or make the defendant not guilty. Danielle Velez went out to smoke Thursday night around 9 p.m. The Jeep wasn't there. That's true. It wasn't there at the time, 9 o'clock, because it was at the house. She went to work Friday morning, and the Jeep was there. And she thought that was unusual because it usually wasn't there overnight. True, that's true, we proved that ourselves. The Jeep went there late Thursday night into Friday morning after 9, and then it was still there Friday morning because Tim was dead. So Danielle Velez helped prove our case and reinforce what we've already told you. And now we have Rebecca True. She was married to James True. He seems like a horrible individual, and I feel sorry for Rebecca True. But Rebecca True also helped prove our case that James True didn't do it because he was in Fort Lauderdale at the time, which we proved to you. How? James True. So if you remember, we had heard a lot about DNA. James True's DNA was on an adult sex toy. And if you recall, also, Defendant's and Tim's DNA was both on that adult sex toy as well. The majority of the DNA on that sex toy was the defendant's. We don't know who had sex with James True at the apartment. That is unknown. All of their DNA was on the sex toy. They both used the apartment for sexual activity. And if you recall, in Deputy Hunt's body cam, the defendant told Deputy Hunt, I was here last Saturday with someone. Tim did not want to play, so he went on a motorcycle ride. So the defendant was there 1 week prior. And that body cam is in evidence if you need to watch it. James True's fingerprint was also on the gun oil lubricant bottle in the bedroom. He was clearly there. He had sex with someone. But what do we know? James True was in Fort Lauderdale where he lived from 5 p.m. on Thursday, March 23rd, until Friday, March 24th at 9:30 a.m. And their own witness, Rebecca True, helped prove what we already knew. She said, all I can say is I was in Marco Island when this happened. But the defendant sent her a selfie from their home in Fort Lauderdale at 5 p.m. on Thursday. And then the next morning, he sent her the video of himself playing with her son at their house in Fort Lauderdale. So we know those parameters right there. What was he doing in between there? So Rebecca True gave us those parameters. Well, now we look at his phone records, because guess what? When the detectives go down there and say, hey, James True, we need to talk to you. Your DNA was found at a crime scene. Can we look at your phone? Sure. Sergeant Pinder didn't need to get a search warrant for James True's phone because he said, here it is, and handed it right over to him. And then there at his house, if you recall, Sergeant Pinder downloaded the contents. And what do we know from James True's phone? He took a selfie in Fort Lauderdale. He liked to take selfies, clearly, on Thursday, March 23rd at 7:47. His phone shows at 7:47 he was in Fort Lauderdale taking a selfie. And then he took another photo of a tag, some sort of tag on a vehicle, at 11:05 in Fort Lauderdale. This is on his phone, 11:05. And his phone records show he received an instant message from Wells Fargo to verify a credit card charge at Blondie Sports Bar at 12:54 a.m. At 12:54 a.m., he was at Blondie Sports Bar doing whatever he did there. Blondie's is in Fort Lauderdale. Sergeant Pinder told you that. He personally knows that he's from Fort Lauderdale. That's a 4 and 5 hour drive to Marion County. Because we know he was back by 9:30 the next morning because he sent Rebecca the video. There's no way James True made it to Marion County, murdered Tim, and then made it back to Fort Lauderdale by 9:30 a.m. to send that video to Rebecca. He may be a despicable human being, but he did not murder Tim Smith. That's impossible with the evidence that we have shown to you. And all of this evidence is there for you to review. Lloyd Kelly. His DNA was on a lubricant bottle cap that was in the apartment. He testified by Zoom. He's in Virginia. He was meeting random people on Grindr for sexual activities with his wife. He doesn't even remember having sex with Tim or the defendant. He doesn't recognize the apartment. He said it's very common for people that he and his wife would meet at hotels to bring their own lubricant. And the defense attorney made a big deal about asking everybody, did you ever obtain a sample of Lloyd Kelly's DNA? Nobody went and swabbed his cheeks, but nobody's disputing that that was his DNA. They got the hit back from CODIS, which is a DNA database, that said it was Lloyd Kelly. And he's in there because he's a convicted felon and he's on probation. Got that. Nobody's disputing it. We don't need to go get another swab from him to prove it. It's his. Nobody's disputing. We're not disputing that. But unlike this guy, there's no reason in the world Lloyd Kelly had to kill Tim. There's been no evidence of a reason, no evidence that he even slept with Tim. We don't know. No reason. I mean, he was married, but his wife was participating in the sexual activity that he was doing with other people. There was not a lick of evidence or a reason Lloyd Kelly would want Tim dead. But there's 1,000 reasons he wants Tim dead. So we're going to move on to 2, which is the last thing we need to prove. Is there any evidence that Tim left that house on his own to go to the apartment to have sex with some unknown person? None. All the testimony's been Tim was in his PJs at 9:30 ready for bed. The defendant told every officer he saw that. Jordan says that. We know he had a big interview with Nina Corsi the next morning, a very important interview, one of the final interviews to get his job. There is no evidence on his cell phone going back several days, up to Thursday, that he would have any planned meeting with a person. There was nothing. Meet me at the apartment at this time. Let's hook up at this time. There was nothing on his phone talking about meeting anybody at the apartment. There's no user activity on Tim's phone after 9:45 p.m. Nothing. Because at 9:30, he's ready to go to bed, and there's nothing after 9:45. The diphenhydramine level, we can't get around that. I mean, he most likely was not even awake, let alone conscious. There's no way that guy was driving to the apartment to have sex with somebody. He couldn't drive, let alone have sex with somebody with that level of diphenhydramine in his system. There is no way. And also, he didn't take his erectile dysfunction medication, which is tadalafil. And if you recall, the tadalafil was found in the apartment. His name's on it, and he's supposed to take it when he needs it. I asked Dr. Corey about that. When you got the blood results back, did the blood results check for tadalafil? Yes, they did. They screened for that medication. Was that in his system? No, it was not. Certainly he would have taken that if he was going to meet somebody at the apartment. The diphenhydramine surely was in there, but the tadalafil was not. So we know that there is not a shred of evidence that he was going to leave that house and go to the apartment. None. That is all speculation and conjecture on the part of the defense. The marriage was over. I think we've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. It started deteriorating in 2019 when they joined AA. Jordan said they stopped drinking, they started arguing. And going back a year before the murder in May of 2022, Diane DeLucy, she hired the defendant to do some work at her house, and he was there a couple times. And she said he was very angry with Tim. And he yelled and screamed while he was there, yelling, "Tim owes me. and Tim is a lazy SOB. And she demonstrated for you how he said those things about Tim. This is just about a year before Tim was murdered. That's when things started their downhill spiral. And in the months leading up to the murder, Jordan would go to work early. She was working at Laredo's Italian restaurant. She would go early just to get away from all of the fighting that was happening at her house. But by March of 2023, we know things were really, really bad. And you heard from Jessica Hendricks and Michael Horton. And they were friends with both Tim and the defendant. These aren't any people that were like, oh, we were best friends with Tim and we didn't like the defendant. They were friends with both of them. And they said about a month before Tim was killed, they hired the defendant to put in a sink, like a salon sink at their house, and it took a long time, about 6 or 7 hours. And all he did for almost the majority of that time is complain about Tim and their relationship. They described him as being frustrated, angry, and defensive. And remember, they weren't asking him questions. I said, were you asking about the relationship? They were not asking questions. That's a long time. Think about how long that was, how mad he must have been to spend so many hours venting about Tim. He told Jessica there were problems in the relationship and they were breaking up. He told Jessica that Tim can't take anything from him. He's a hardworking man and he supported the family, which we know is not true. You have all the financial records which are in evidence. And the defendant told Jessica if he had to do it all over again, he wouldn't marry a man. He was done. He was mad. He told Michael about Tim's new job. He was not happy about that either. He told Michael Horton they were fighting a lot and they were probably going to split up. And the demeanor that everybody describes as angry and mad. And if you recall, Michael Horton tried to console the defendant because they were friends. So I mean, he's got no reason to make any of this up. I said, what did you say to the defendant when he was complaining? I tried to console him because we were friends. We've got no reason to come in here and make any of these things up. Now, we did put some hospital records and evidence for something to show you, but Jessica and Michael were about a month before Tim was killed. Now we move on to Sunday, March 19th of 2022. This is 4 days before the murder. Tim was in the hospital. The defendant went to brunch with their group of friends from AA. And he sat next to Daryl Levine. And he started telling Daryl that Tim was getting another job, and he was very unhappy about it. And he told Daryl, if Tim thinks he's going to get another job and leave me with nothing, he's got another thing coming. Did that happen? Did he say that? Yes. And we also know because Kevin Branch heard it. He was at the brunch and you heard him say it. And if you recall, he said, the defendant wasn't even talking to me. But because of the intensity with which he was saying these things, I turned to look. So imagine, you're at a big brunch, the intensity with which the defendant was complaining about Tim was so strong that Kevin turned and looked. And he heard him say, if Tim thinks he's leaving me and taking another job somewhere else, he's got another thing coming. And then the defendant also told Daryl, which really bothered Daryl, Jordan and I loved Tim. We really did. In the past tense. All of these witnesses and all of this testimony confirms there's no question this marriage was over. And think about this new job. You heard a lot about that and you probably wonder why. Well, think about that he was willing to leave a job he had been at for 7 or 8 years. He loved that job, everybody loved him there. This was not a big pay raise. He wasn't getting a big pay raise. I mean, of course he said, look, he was making more than we were willing to pay, but I was going to get the management, the owners, to come up to what his salary was because she wanted him so bad. So he wasn't getting a pay raise, and he was going to have to relocate. He was going to have to leave all of his close friends, and you've heard about the close group of friends that he had. And think about this, he was also going to have to leave Jordan. I mean, Jordan was like a daughter to him. He and the defendant had been together since she was 8 years old. How bad were things with the defendant that Tim was going to give up everything he had and loved in Ocala to get away from this guy? He was going to give it all up. for no more money and to leave everything. And we know he definitely wanted the job, because Nina Corsi said, well, she was surprised too that he wanted to leave Brookdale. She was surprised. Tim said he was very excited for a new opportunity and change. That's what he said. The last thing that Tim emailed Nina Corsi, she testified, was, can't wait to talk to you, looking forward to it, at 9:43 on Thursday, March 23rd. That final interview was Friday at 9 a.m. And you know he was going to get the job because Nina said, I told the owners, this guy's great, he's very professional, we need to make him an offer. And she said when she recommended someone to the owners, they always went with what she said. But think about how bad things were that he was going to give up everything he loved to get away from this guy. And how would a divorce affect the defendant? Well, we know because he told everybody how financially destitute he would be without Tim's salary. He told everybody, after Tim died, I need the life insurance money, I'm struggling financially. There's no question that he could not afford to live the way he was without Tim's salary. The day after they found Tim's body, Candace Baker went over to the house. And she said the defendant was already in the office looking for the insurance papers. And he told her, I need my money. The day after they found Tim's body. Why? Because that's why he did it, so he would have the life insurance money. He told Jordan multiple times he needed the insurance money to pay the bills. He told Victor Gardner multiple times he was struggling financially. He told Daryl Levine he was having a hard time getting the insurance money and he needed it. He told everybody that. That was no secret. And he talked about getting the insurance settlement and that he was going to take a big trip in an RV to the mountains once he got his money. Now, Deputy Kyle Shaw is the first well-being deputy. He did that check on Friday, March 24th. And if you recall, the defendant did everything he could to make sure that that deputy had no reason to make forced entry into the apartment. Everything he could. Deputy described the situation as nothing urgent, nothing to cause alarm or suspicion. He said the defendant made it seem like it was not that big of a deal. The defendant told Deputy Shaw, oh, Tim meets clients here and then he leaves in their car all the time. No worries. Based on what the deputy saw and the defendant's lack of concern, lack of urgency, there was no exigent circumstances and Deputy Shaw could not break into the apartment. And the defendant told Sergeant Pinder that Deputy Shaw told him to go check the hospitals to see maybe Tim's there. Which is interesting, because guess what? The 2 weekends before the defendant murdered Tim was in the hospital. This is March 11th of 2023. This is 2 weekends before. Tim goes to the hospital because he was complaining of waking up in the morning, trying to get out of bed, and then passing out and falling on the floor. He woke up, he was weak, and he was unable to get to the bed. Once he was helped to the bed, he was seeing double vision, and he again passed out. 2 weekends before, Tim's at the hospital. He doesn't stay that day, all the hospital records are in evidence. He checks himself out, they do a bunch of tests, they're like, we don't know what's wrong, and he leaves. But guess what? He goes back the following weekend. And this is the Saturday before he's murdered, March 18th. He goes back to the hospital again. Same thing. He says, complains of weakness, difficulty getting his words out, and it began at 00:30, which would be 12:30 in the morning, when he woke out of a sleep. He attempted to ambulate, to walk to the bathroom. When he became weak, he had difficulty getting out of bed and difficulty getting his words out. He had to spend the night in the hospital. This is Saturday. He spent the night at the hospital and got discharged on Sunday. This is the Sunday that the defendant was at La Cuisine having brunch, while his husband was in the hospital for the second weekend in a row. And these are the things. He's passing out. He's dizzy. He can't get his words out. This is the weekend before his body's found. Knowing that, how do you not tell the deputy that when he comes there on Friday when you call him. You don't tell the deputy? Oh my God. My husband has been in the hospital the past 2 weekends. He's been passing out, he's weak, he can't talk. We don't know what's wrong with him. You don't tell the deputy that? It's because you don't want the deputy to go in there, and you already know that, you know Tim's dead in there.
Excuse me. I'll push for a second.
What is the normal response for someone whose spouse had just gotten out of the hospital? What is a person's normal response? Kick in the door? Is Tim passed out in the apartment? His Jeep's here. He's passed out the past 2 weekends. He hasn't even been able to get to the bed. A person's normal response would be to break in the door. He was a handyman. He put that door on. He could fix the door. His excuse is, I didn't want to get arrested, so I didn't kick in the door. Okay. He didn't do that. He didn't do any of that because he knew Tim was already dead in there. Even if he didn't want to kick in the door, he would have certainly told the deputy. And the only reason he didn't do any of that is because he knew Tim was already in there dead. Because if he didn't know that, he would have forced entry into the apartment or certainly told the deputy, because then the deputy would have been able to go in there under exigent circumstances. And even further, when he finally gets Jack, the landlord, to meet him at the apartment with the key, he still doesn't go in. If you recall the body cam, the deputy comes up and he's standing against the car with Jack, the landlord. Jack was asked, why didn't you guys go in if you were both there with the key? And Jack, the landlord, said, he didn't want to go in. I don't know why we waited for the deputy. I mean, his whole thing is, I don't have a key, I don't have a key, I can't get in. Well, when you finally get the key, and you're standing there with the landlord, why don't you go in then? And he had been there the weekend before, on his own without Tim. The landlord is there. There's no reason not to go in. The only reason is because he knows Tim's already dead in there. He's got a key and he's just kicking back with Jack, waiting for the cops to get there. There's no other reason he didn't go in there with the key. And these are, you heard about the text messages that the defendant sent to Tim over Thursday night and Friday and Saturday. And these are just two that I put up here from Saturday. And the first one's at 5:48 in the morning. The defendant is trying to cover his tracks. He's got to make it look like I'm looking for Tim. He says, hey, Tim, still haven't heard from you. Spent all night, still worried. Please give me a call if you get a chance. Love you. Of course, no response. Then at 6:06, hey, babe, I have no idea where you're at. What's going on? I'm heading to work in the Villages. Please give me a call. Is this a realistic text that you're going to send your husband, who hasn't contacted you, hasn't called you, hasn't texted you? You've got the police involved. If you didn't kill him and you're really worried about where he is you just going to be like, hey, babe, I don't know where you are? Or are you going to be like, call me right now. I've called the cops. Where are you?
I'm going to object to golden rule again.
Sustained.
And I would move for a mistrial at this point.
Then, Jim, I'm going to ask you to step out just for a few moments with the bailiff. All right, sir, the jury is out of the courtroom. You had an objection. I sustained the objection. Is there anything further you want the court to consider?
Yes, I would ask the court, I would move the court for a mistrial. The state initially crossed that line in the golden rule territory. The court caught it, it admonished the parties, and now it has happened yet again. The only recourse, I don't believe a curative instruction is enough to overcome what has occurred. For a golden rule, the remedy is a mistrial. So I am moving for a mistrial at this point, and would ask the court to grant the motion.
Ms. Berndt?
Judge, after we discussed that at the bench, I said a person the next several times. That was the first time, if I said you, that I said it after a person. I clearly said a person all the times after that.
All right. First of all, I don't find there was a true golden rule violation, which is when an attorney is trying to put the juror in the place of the defendant or the victim in order to gain sympathy, in order to, generate some sort of empathy, anger, anything else along those lines, because that's not appropriate for the jury to consider. I noticed Ms. Berndt saying you. As I told you guys when I called you up, I just said, hey, let's kind of be careful about this, because my opinion, and what I said when you guys came up here, in case the record wasn't clear, is that I believe she's using you in kind of the omniscient, like not you as a juror, just like you as in, the omniscient, the world in general. She was using it to describe how generally a person might feel or do, and then comparing that to what the defendant did. I find that I believe in this situation, and what I find is that there's no intention to put the jurors in the place, or make the jurors feel like they're in the place of the defendant or the victim or anyone else. Is simply a manner of speaking, a way of describing events, a way of describing actions, a way of describing thoughts. Like I said, I don't think that it was a golden rule violation. I just ask you to be careful, because sometimes people might interpret it as that. Because, for example, if you said, Juror A, how would you feel if someone came behind you and strangled you? That would be a golden rule violation. Here, I think, like I said, it wasn't being used to particularly have a juror be placed in the position of victim or defendant, just kind of used in the omniscient. And then instead of saying, how would a person feel, she said, how would you feel? There's really very little difference in that, and it's really just a manner of speaking. So I'm going to deny the motion for mistrial for those reasons. But again, caution you that, and it may just be the way you communicate. We all communicate differently, but we do have to be careful to instead of saying the word you, saying how would, a rational person or
Yes,
anything
sir.
like that. And I understand this is a closing argument. It's when any person is making an argument in front of a tribunal, you got to think about what you're saying, you got to think about the facts, you got to think about the law. You're not always really careful enough to make sure that you speak in this perfectly neutral manner. You kind of just use your regular way you might communicate with somebody. And that's what I think is happening here. Again, I don't find there's an actual intention to make the jurors feel empathy, sympathy, or be in the place of the victim here. That would be problematic. Like I said, and I think I described the differences between the two. But it is a court of law, so I ask everyone to be careful about how we phrase things. But I'll deny the motion for mistrial at this time. Do you want me to give a curative instructions or not? Mr. Klein?
No, Your Honor, I don't believe a curative instruction would be appropriate. I believe the only remedy is a mistrial, and I respect the court's ruling in that regard.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, we'll bring the jurors back. Thank you. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to begin. Go ahead, Ms. Berndt.
Thank you. As I was saying, these are the two texts that the defendant sent to Tim the morning that his body was found, on March 25th. All of the defendant's actions show he did not care that Tim was dead. What did he do after they found Tim's body? He wasn't upset at all when Deputy Hunt's body came, which you saw. When he said, deputy came out, the defendant asked, is he in there? The deputy said yes. The defendant said, is he okay? The deputy said no, and he just went. He never asked, what happened? Was he murdered? Did he commit suicide? Can I go see his body? Didn't ask any of those things. Just said, whew. And then when Deputy Hunt said, I'm gonna call major crimes, he didn't ask, was he murdered? Why would you call major crimes? What happened to him? Was he shot? Was he stabbed? Doesn't ask any of those questions. And Sergeant Pinder talked to the defendant right after they found the body in his car. And he said the defendant was pleasant and calm. Nobody that talked to the defendant Saturday when Tim's body was found, or any of the days after that, said the defendant was upset. Nobody. They all described him as normal. And the defendant, this is Sunday when Candace Baker talked about this. Sunday after they find the body, the defendant is throwing all of Tim's things away. Everything. Clothes, knickknacks, food, vitamins, professionally taken photographs that were hanging on the wall. The defendant took them down and had them stacked on the table. Everything. It was a fire sale, get rid of it all. Why? Because he didn't care. He killed him, he got rid of him, and we're moving on. And he told Candace. Candace was very upset. And he said it was his house and he could finally have it the way he wanted. Are these the actions and the things of a man who's upset? That his husband, that he's been with for 15 years, is dead? And the next morning, early in the morning after they find Tim's body, he's on Grindr, the dating application where they meet men to have sex with them. The following morning, 2 people saw him on that, not just one. And he took all of Tim's books and journals and a strip of photographs and donated them to Soul Essentials. And that was 5 days after they found Tim's body. And Darrell Levine said the defendant was at a gay campground the weekend after Tim's body was found. He said it could have been the weekend after, 1 to 2 weekends after Tim's body was found. The defendant was happy and having a great time by the pool. That's what he was doing. And then he moved his friend Kevin into the house and was sleeping with him in the bed he shared with Tim. Victor Gardner told you that Kevin had moved into the house, and Jordan told you they were sleeping in the same bed. This is the picture strip that the defendant got rid of when he donated all of Tim's things, and this is Tim's journal. And you can see from these pictures, they appear to be younger. They appear to be very happy in these pictures. And this is Tim's journal, where he's written things about himself. Hugger, comforter, compassionate leader, good listener. The defendant got rid of those things. If he loved Tim and was upset that Tim had been murdered, these are pictures of a happy time with Tim, where Tim wrote words that described himself. If he cared about Tim and hadn't murdered Tim, he would keep this forever. This is a big thing he got rid of 5 days after. Now, besides all of those things, and all of the testimony from everybody that said they were fighting, he hated Tim, he said he wasn't going to let him leave without him, he needed the money, and the insurance records are in evidence, you can look at those, and there's the 401k as well as the $333 of life insurance. There was a retirement policy, and that's in evidence for $48,000, and he was the beneficiary of all of those, and we know how badly he needed the money. But on top of all of those things that I just went over with you, we had the video proof. Now remember that the defendant told everyone he was home all night sleeping. Everybody he talked to, from friends to first arriving deputies to Sergeant Pinder. He told Deputy Hunt in that body cam he takes sleeping pills and was asleep all night Thursday night. He told Sergeant Pinder he took melatonin and he sleeps hard. That's his quote. The videos prove he was not sleeping all night. And I tried to condense these and make these as easy to follow as I could. I know you heard a lot about different times and videos. The first thing that happens is the defendant driving his truck to the apartment after he murders Tim. And I want to go over this map that I know you saw a lot of quickly. Right here is where Tim and the defendant lived. This is Pedro Vasquez's residence, where we have a lot of video from. Down here, this is not a road. There's one house that's down here with one person that lives here. So if the defendant is going to leave his house, he either comes out the front way and has to come up this road to get to 52nd, or he can come out the back of his house this way and come out here. So those are the only two ways in and out, are this way or this way, right here. And Pedro Vasquez had cameras at both of those places. So when the defendant was supposedly sleeping hard, we have his truck leaving the residence. And the first time we have it leaving, it's coming out this way. So it comes out this way, it goes here, passes the Vasquez cameras, and goes up. This is a picture of the defendant's truck, and we talked a lot about it was distinctive because it looks like the tailgate's down in this picture, but it's not. The tailgate is up, and the whole truck is white, and this tailgate is black. Now this is Friday, early morning, 1:59 a.m., when the defendant was supposedly sleeping. This is the same time that Tim's phone leaves the house and moves towards the apartment. Tim's phone is moving, Tim's body is in there, and the black bag is in there, and this is the defendant's truck, and this is from the video. It's just a stop. The video stopped right here. This is him passing the Vasquez house, going up the road right there. And he's the only one that had a white truck like that, and leaving at 1:59, the same time. You can see the picture, clear as day. And this is the other one. If you remember, the Vasquez had two camera angles that were going on that road. This is the other camera angle. Here we go, we're leaving. 1:59 a.m., same time Tim's phone is moving. Here's his truck. Then we pass by some more things. I know you've probably heard more than you ever want to hear about these places. Green for Life. This truck passing by here. And this time is approximately 2 a.m. And if you recall, the time was off on the Green for Life camera. And we made sure that we had the person who actually got the video and worked at the store talk to you about whether the time was off. Plus the deputy that collected the video also told you whether the time was off. And they both testified that this would be approximately 2 in the morning. So he leaves his house around 1:59. He's passing green for life at 2 a.m. Now this right here, if you can see, is the true green right here. I'm sorry, triple crowns. He's passing at 2:02 on Friday. Triple crown. And this is his truck. Going by right underneath the red. And now the Marathon gas station, 2:02. And they said that they're right by each other, so it would be about the same time he'd be passing the Marathon and the Triple Crown. Here you go. That's his truck. So you have him clearly leaving, passing by Pedro Vasquez's, passing by those three businesses, exactly the time he would be passing them to go to the apartment. So he gets to the apartment, and then he's got to come back home, because now we got to get Tim's Jeep. So now he drives the truck back to the apartment. He's put Tim's body and Tim's phone in the black bag in the apartment, and he's there about 20 minutes. And now he's coming back. And this is the Marathon. There's the truck right here, 2:23. He's there about 20 minutes. Here's his truck going the other way, heading back towards the residence, right here. Triple Crown, 2:25. Right here is his truck, heading back to the residence. And there's no video of him coming back from the green for life, because if you recall, the deputy said that for some reason skipped ahead a few minutes, so the time that he would be passing by there wasn't on the video. That's why there's no green for life. So he gets home. And this is him passing by Pedro Vasquez, coming back home. Right here. This is 2:27. As you recall, he lives right down here. And he's got a fence. And you're going to see him turn right into his house. There he comes. This is him coming right by. And we know that that's his house, the direction he's going. Because that's the only thing back there. Now what is he going to do? Now he's got to get Tim's Jeep to the apartment. And this now is 2:40 in the morning. So he's gone home, he's been there for a couple minutes, now he's doing Tim's Jeep. Got to get that there. And again, this is coming right from his house. There's nothing else down here. That's coming from his house. Tim's Jeep moving out now. $240. Now, we have the Jeep's going to be taking the exact same path that the truck took. 241, passing green for life. Tim's Jeep. Going by the Triple Crown, 203. I'm sorry, 243. The correct time because the video camera was off. And this right here is the Jeep going by at 243. There's the Jeep right here. You can clearly see it. This is the Marathon. 243, because those are right by each other, so the time's the same. This is clearly Tim's Jeep. 243, going to the apartment. And now you heard that Tim's phone was found in the toolbox in the apartment. That toolbox is right by a window that faces the parking lot. So when the Jeep pulls up to the apartment, it connects with Tim's phone, because he has the Bluetooth. So Tim's phone is there right by the window in that toolbox, and when the Jeep pulls up, they connect. And here's the report that's in evidence. And this is at 2:44. We know the Jeep connects with Tim's phone. That's when the Jeep is pulling up. And again, this is in evidence. This right here is from 6:45, because that's when he got home Thursday on the 23rd. He came home and it disconnected from the Jeep. Now here you are right here, 3:24, 2:44, connected, and then disconnected. 2:44, the Jeep pulls up and connects with Tim's phone, which is in the apartment. There's more evidence, and all of these things just confirm all the video. But we have the other video, and I call it the cat video, because the cat's the one that set it off, if you recall. And what do we know about that? This is very small, I wrote it bigger here, it's on the bottom, it says 2:32 right here is the time. This is from Stuart Mitchell. He's funny, he said, I was nosy, so I looked out to see what was happening. So this is his apartment, and he has his camera that faces right here. If you look at the bottom here, you can see the cat that sets it off when I start playing it. A cat walks by and sets it off. And as you can see, at 2:32, the Jeep is not there. This is where we're looking. This is where the Jeep eventually ends up. The Jeep is not there. There's the cat right there on the bottom. No Jeep, 2:32. Now, we're at 3:26, and you know that because you can see in the bottom, it's very small, 3:26. The cat sets it off again, you'll see the cat. Here's the Jeep. The Jeep is there, and the Jeep was not there before. Because we know the Jeep got there at 2:44 because that's when it connected to Tim's phone. And clearly, if the Jeep does not set off the motion activation on this camera, then if the defendant parked on the other side of the Jeep to go into the apartment, it's not going to set that off either. That's common sense. So the Jeep didn't set it off, a truck parked on the other side is not going to set it off at all. You can see the cat right there on the bottom, set it off, and now Tim's Jeep is there. So we know it wasn't there before, and it's there now, and all of this evidence just corroborates everything that we have. Because we know it got there on 2:44, it was there. Now the defendant has to walk back home, because he's left the Jeep. And Detective Pinder had to look through a lot of video, but he found him walking. And I put a red circle around so you can follow. I know it's hard to follow. This is the path that he's walking, starts here. Walking, walking, walking. This is at 2:51. This is from the Marathon gas station. Now, you'll see when the red circle starts and it follows. But if you watch, you can see when he walks by somewhere where there's a light. Like right here, it will go dark when he walks by. And then when he gets right here, you can see him walking through. And especially right here, you can see the body walking. Remember, look right here because you'll be able to see when he walks by there. See him walking right by there, and you'll see it again right here. He's moving. He's got to get home. Again, crosses right by. You can see when the light right there goes off when he walks by. According to Google Maps, which again are in evidence, it would take 35 minutes for the defendant to get from that spot at the Marathon gas station back to his house walking. That would put him at his house at 3:26 a.m. He is accessing that Ring doorbell camera at 3:26 a.m. Can't get around that, the phone records are in evidence. When he was sleeping hard after he took his melatonin, he somehow is accessing the Ring doorbell at 3:26, the time he would get home after that walk. And then after that, he's on Facebook, Grindr, and Gmail until he leaves to go to the gym. Jordan Swilley. In a case of a death by 1,000 cuts, this is the final cut, right here, Jordan Swilley. She's obviously in a terrible position. She loves her dad. She loves Tim, who's like a second father to her. She said she got woken up because she heard a noise. She doesn't know what kind of noise, but the noise woke her up. Her Ring doorbell app was going off after the noise multiple times, she said. She didn't check it, but it went off multiple times. And the next morning, the defendant asked her if she heard anything. She said yes, and the defendant said, "You were sleeping, that's all you need to remember." I asked her, "Did the defendant ask you to lie for him?" She said yes. He told her, "If anyone asks, I was home all night." But we know he wasn't home all night. She was upset, she was confused. She went to her best friend Layla's house to talk to her about what she heard that night before and what her dad had told her. And then she even had to go to see her friend Allison just to get a hug. She was so upset. Tim was gone, she didn't know where he was, and her dad was telling her to lie for him. Probably one of the most important pieces of evidence that she said is that Friday night after they went to the apartment, her dad made her stop at a gas station so he could throw away a pill bottle because he didn't want to throw them away at home. That was the alternative. He didn't want to get caught. This case has clearly been proven to you beyond every reasonable doubt. We would ask that you find the defendant, Herbert Swilley, guilty of first-degree murder. Thank you.
Thank you very much.